Hello, Honors Geometry students, and welcome to your first video lesson. Hopefully these will be good for you to go back and possibly review, or if you're absent for whatever reason, you could go and watch these videos and then have more time in class where you can ask your teacher some questions. So our first unit is going to be a bunch of algebra review that you're going to need these algebraic skills for the rest of this year. So it's very important that this foundation, that you have a solid understanding in order to be successful the rest of the year. So if you're confused at any point, please make sure you ask your teacher. All right, so the first lesson is on solving algebra equations. So this is going to be a wide variety of types of equations that you should have learned to solve in both pre-algebra and algebra. So let's start our examples. Right, so for our first example, we have 5x minus 4 equals 31. Now, when you solve equations, hopefully you remember from last year that what you do is you do the reverse order of operations. So you'd first want to undo any addition or subtraction that's occurring. In this equation, we have 5x minus 4 equals 31. So what I would have to do is add 4 to both sides. Undoing the minus 4 from the left side, I'm left with 5x equals 35. And now I undo multiplication and division. So I would divide by 5. And so then I get x equals 35 divided by 5 is 7. That is my final answer. Now it's a nice thing that with the equations, you could check your answer. You take that value that you got, so we got x equals 7, and plug that into your original equation. You would have 5 times 7 minus 4, and you're checking, does this equal 31? Because if this equation does have one single solution, which is what we got one solution, then when you plug that number in, it should make this equation balance out. So 35 minus 4 is 31. 31 does equal 31. You can be certain then that your answer that you got of 7 is correct. Any other number would not work if you plugged it into this equation. All right, looking over here at number 2, we have negative 16 equals negative 4m plus 6. So again, I'm going to undo the addition and subtraction first. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. Negative 16 minus 6 is negative 22. This is going to equal negative 4m because when I subtracted 6 on one side, it undid that plus 6 that was there. And remember that equation, that equal sign is like a scale where you have the two sides that are trying to be balanced. Whatever you do to one side, if you add some weight to the left, you're going to have to counteract that by adding some weight to the right. All right, so now we have negative 22 equals negative 4m. To get rid of, we want the m by itself. Remember, our goal when solving equations is to isolate the variable, get it by itself. And so if it's being multiplied, if the variable is being multiplied by negative 4, we divide by negative 4. So now notice that this is not evenly divisible. We will not get a whole number here. So m is going to equal, if I have negative 22 over negative 4, a negative over a negative is always going to equal positive. And then I see that both the numerator and the denominator, I could reduce and divide both of these by 2, so I get 11 halves. Now, most times kids get nervous when you get a fraction. A lot of times they're like, oh, did I mess up, or is this just a fractional answer? So don't forget that with equations, you can always plug in whatever you got and check your answer. Ask your teacher for clarification if they expect you to check the answers or not. But when in doubt, and if you have time, especially on assessment, if you have extra time, I would strongly encourage going back and checking that answer. Okay, so negative 4 times 11 halves, depending on how you were taught in previous years. This could be done a few different ways. We're actually going to talk more about fractions in the next lesson. But I like to say, okay, 2 is going to go into negative 4 2 times. This gives me negative 22 plus 6. Now negative 16 is going to equal negative 16 is what I get on the right side as well. So even though my answer wasn't a nice integer or a whole number, I know that it's correct. Try to get yourself used to not using calculators for problems like this. For basic arithmetic, we are going to expect that you can do that without a calculator. In fact, most of our assessments are going to be without a calculator for this semester to better prepare you for upcoming and future math classes. All right, let's take a look at number 3. And I see we have negative 13 minus 6/7 r equals 7. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of, because again, my goal is to isolate that variable. That's what I want to get by itself. So I'm going to add 13 to both sides. And when I do that, I get rid of that minus 13. I'm left with negative 6/7 r. I bring that sign down that's in front of my coefficient and my variable, and I get 20. Again, at this step, it kind of depends what you learned last year and previous years of how to solve equations like this. I know there are kids that will go and they're going to divide away negative 6/7 like this. And then when they get to the right side, they're kind of confused on what to do. So I never encourage my students to do that. Instead, I have them multiply both sides by the reciprocal of that fraction. Because the reciprocal times a fraction, when you take two numbers that are reciprocals and you multiply them, you cancel them out. So you will be left with r equals, and then again, I like to think, okay, 6 and 20, what do they have in common? What can I take out, divide out of both of those? What whole number? I could take out a 3. So I would be, or I'm sorry, a 2. So I would be left with 3 and 10. And when I multiply these together now, I get negative 70 thirds, which I could have written as 70 thirds. I could have written that as the negative out in front and then a 3. And again, if you're a little bit iffy when it comes to fractions here, tomorrow's lesson is going to be just dealing with fractions. Okay, so that should be clarified. Tomorrow's video will be fractions. All right, for number 4, there are a couple of ways that you can start this problem. I do think that for most people, when you have 8 times the quantity, 2x minus 3 equals negative 24, I think the instinct of most of us is going to be to distribute this 8 to both of the terms inside of the parentheses. So 8 times 2x will give us 16x minus 8 times 3 is going to be 24 equals negative 24. I add 24 to both sides, and now I would have 16x equals 0 divided by 16. 0 divided by any number is equal to 0. 16 times 0 is what would get me that 0. Okay, and again, if you're not sure, plug it back in. You would have 8 times 2 times 0, which is 0, minus 3. So 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. The second way to do this, because I only have my two factors, two numbers that are being, not numbers, but two things that are being multiplied, I could take that 8 and divide it from both sides. Now, if the left side of this equation had something past the parentheses, like plus 7 or what have you, I would not be able to do this step right off the bat. I'd have to get rid of if there was something being added or subtracted right there. Okay, so by dividing by 8, I now have made the left side 2x minus 3, and then the right side is going to be negative 3. So it becomes a, I basically divided everything out 8 out of this entire equation. So I would be left with 2x equals 0, and again, just as before, 0 divided by anything is 0. So either way you do this problem, you will get the same answer because there is only one solution to this problem. Okay, so for number 5, we have 7 minus 4 times the quantity, negative 2y minus 8 equals negative 9y. So I don't have two terms being multiplied like I did before, where I could take that constant in front of the parentheses and divide it away. I have this 7 minus 4. So now again, a very common mistake, because usually we look left to right at problems the same way that we read. We are going to want to write, oh, this is equal to 3 times negative 2y minus 8. But that's incorrect order of operations. Order of operations, we have to first multiply, bounced over there. First have to multiply this 4 throughout the parentheses. So the 7 just comes down, and now I'm going to distribute this 4. So negative 4, that's how I treat it, because you could think of it as a plus negative or minus 4. But negative 4 and negative 2y is going to be plus 8y, and then plus 32 equals negative 9y. the left side of this equation, I am able to simplify. So I have to go and simplify what I can. I have a constant of 7 and I have a constant of 32. And I could combine those two. They are being added. So 7 plus 32 is 39 plus 8y is going to equal negative 9y. Okay, let's get our y's together. So if I have a plus 8y on the left, I subtract it from both sides to get it together with the y on the right. I'm going to have 39, this crosses out, is going to equal negative 17y. To get the y by itself, divide both sides by negative 17. And 39 and 17 have no common factors. There's nothing I could divide out of both of those numbers. So that would be my solution. If I had time, I would definitely plug that back in because that looks very sus. It looks like a weird number that I would think, I probably messed up. I would always, think maybe I made a mistake somewhere along the way. So first I just scan through, make sure the problem's correct. If it still looks kind of strange, I always would just plug it back in and make sure that it does work. If you want to know how that is done, please ask your teacher in class tomorrow. Okay, let's look at our last problem here. All right, let's look at number 6, our last problem over here. We have 16u minus 11 equals 7 times the quantity 5 plus 2u. So this right side kind of looks like how it did in number 4, the problem above, where we have a number times and then parentheses, two terms that are being added or subtracted. I wouldn't divide by 7 here because if you look at that, sure, that'll make my right side, my right side will look nice. It'll be 5 plus 2u. But then I have to divide every single piece on the left side by 7. And 16 isn't divisible by 7. 11's not divisible by 7. So I don't want to do that. It just becomes too messy. In this case, it makes no sense to divide by that constant. Instead, it does make sense to distribute on the right. So 7 times 5 is 35. Plus 7 times 2u is 14u. At this point, you have 4 different ways you could solve this equation. You could subtract 16u. You could add 11. Looking at the right side, you could subtract 35. You could subtract 14u. I think the majority of us prefer when our variable, the letter that we're solving for, is on the left. So therefore, that's why I decided I'm going to add 14u to both sides. 16u minus 14u is 2u. Minus 11 equals 35. Add 11 to both sides. You get 2u equals 46. Divide both sides by 2. U is going to equal 23. Michael Jordan. Okay, that is all for today's lesson. Tomorrow in class, you're going to come in and we will have a worksheet for you to work on that you will submit before the bell rings, and then have more videos tomorrow night for homework. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.